Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaroi. Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for joining on this very wintry and cold morning. Have to warm ourselves up some way. So we're going to attempt to do that be'ezras Hashem as we carry on with Likutei Moharan Amud. Today's shir is sponsored in the schus for Refuah Shlema for Yoel Zakam and Devorah Etel, and for the Gevurah Shlema, also sponsored anonymously b'schus Shidduchim for Klai, for Klai Yisrael singles. Be'ezras Hashem, we should only share Besuris Tovas with all of Klai Yisrael. Okay, so we jump back into Torah Amud, and we were looking yesterday at this incredible remez from Rabbeinu HaKadosh on the concept of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, we learned, is the cluster of all the traits necessary to be able to take the Sechel Elyon and to draw it down into the vessels of the Sechel Tachton so that we can access it properly. And we learned that in order to do that, a person needs to be a Sonei Betza. Check, right? Tick. Avram Avinu was a Sonei Betza. We learned that Avram Avinu is connected to the aspect of the Bas, right? Which is the element of Malchus, because Bas Hayel Avraham Uba Kol Shema, that was the aspect of the Chesed, the great Chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrated in being mitzamtzim himself in such a way that here we can access godliness and that we can live in a physical realm, but by upgrading our consciousness we can begin to live in a deeper reality than the reality that is seen and perceived just with our eyes, with our ears, and our physical modes of perception. We can use a deeper level of eyesight to be able to perceive a deeper reality. That was the inyan of Bas Hayla Avraham. And then Avraham Avinu is the aspect of, Chesed, right? That's what we learned. You need Kitzur Lefi Chesed to carve out, so to speak, the Malchus to Tochacha that takes hold of what could potentially be the Malchus to Kedusha and to free Malchus from its clutches. That was the aspect of Chesed. Avram Avinu, of course, is the Amud Ha'emuna, and so that's also, right, obviously a person who's contacting the Sechel Elyon through the prism or through the confines or the apparent confines of the Malchus de Sitra Achra. That's the aspect of Avram Avinu in that sense as well. And therefore we learn that Avram Avinu battles against the Daled Malachim, which is the aspect of the Malchus de Kedusha, which is unified, that ultimately becomes fragmented down in the Sechel Tachton, which is the aspect of the Malchuyos de Sitra Achra. And that's the four Malchuyos, and those are the collectivity of the four kings that Avram battles against. Avram is allied with the five kings. The five kings is the aspect of the four letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, but they don't exist even in the aspect of four layers, right, of reality. They don't exist outside of the quintessence, right? That's why quintessence is five. Quint is five, right? So quintessence means there's a point from which everything else emerges, right? So four is two dots and two dots. Quint, right? The Maral speaks about this. Five points to essence, because the fifth one is not going to go on one side or the other side. It's the quintessence, right? So it is the essence because it's quint. It sits above the two sides, right? And that's the aspect of the five kings where Avram Avinu is allying himself together with an experience of this worldliness, which is Asiya, which draws on Yitzira, which draws on Bria, which draws on Atzilus, which is ultimately emergent from the point of the quintessence, which is the Ein Sof. And using this, he battles against the Malchuyas to Sitra Achra. And that's the aspect of Avram Tikkun shacharis. Shacharis is the Nakuda of Shchaira Ani Vinava. Shchaira Ani, we learned, is the aspect of the blackness of the eye, of the pupil, the Bas Ayin, which is this worldliness, which is reflective, like the pupil is, of Nova, which is the Sechel Elyon. So Avram Tikkun shacharis, meaning Avram Avinu and his energy of Sonei Betza, which is Sur Mirah, and then accessing Amunah, because Avram is the Amud Amunah, that Avram Avinu is able to be misakin the shacharis of this worldliness, that instead of seeing blackness, he sees whiteness reflected in the blackness. And that's the inyan of Tikkun shacharis, which is Tikkun shacharos. And within, that's what we learned yesterday, within the word shacharis is a hint to the four Malchuyas, the Kedusha. That's what Avram Avinu is able to rectify by perceiving the deeper layers of spiritual reality within the confines of the physical world. And that is because Avram Avinu gives rise in his progeny to the four Malchuyos de Kedusha, which is the aspect of each in their own way, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and even Esav and Yishmael. Like we learned, Yitzchak is going to be the world of Atzilos, Yaakov is going to be the world of Bria, Yishmael is going to be the world of Yitzira, which is Toivera, and Esav is going to be the world of Asiya. That's what we learned yesterday. And these are correlated with the four sons of Pesach, which is the Chacham, Rasha, Tam, and She'eni Yedea. The Chacham is Yitzchak, the Rasha is Esav, Tam is Yaakov, She'eni Yedea is Yishmael, and that's Avram Tikein shacharis. Shacharis is Rosh Tevis, Chacham, Tam, Rasha, and She'enoi Yodea. And that's Avram Tikein shacharis. And how does a person go ahead and give the final hammer blow, so to speak, to the Dalet Malchuyos to Sitra Achra? So the Rebbe had told us we need to be Mekabel, the light of life, from the Shalish Regalim. Shalish Pa'am Mashana Yorakos Zechucha as Penei Adon Hashem, and the Panim is the Panim de Kedusha, the Panim is the Panim of vitality, the Panim is the Panim of light, Ya'er Hashem Panav Ilecha, and therefore, says the Heilige Rebbe, you're going to look for where Shmuel is cutting up the king of Amalek, Agag, which represents the quintessence of the Malchuyos to Sitra Achra, because Reish is Goyim Amalek, and there in the Klipa Keneged Klal Yisrael who are called Reishis Tubuasai. And Rashi tells us on that pasuk, Vayishasef Shmuel Sagag, Rashi says, Chatacha l'dalet, he cut him into 4 pieces. Says the Heilige Rebbe, okay, how did he have 4 pieces? How was he able to go ahead and to divide Amalek up, right, and carve out the fourfold aspect of Malchus from within his clutches? And the answer is right there in the word, Vayishasef, where the Vav and the Yud is for the Pu'ula, and he. And the main word, the Shirish, is Shasef, and that's, of course, Rosh Tevis, Shavuos, Sukkos, and Pesach. He did it with the energy of the Shalish Regalim. Pile Plain. Okay, let's continue with Isaiah. Says the Heilige Rebbe, Schusi Aganalina Be'ikr, Skalas HaChesed and Iskalael, in order to have this aspect of Chesed emergent, and in order for it to be emergent, in order for it to emerge, in order to make sure that we can carve out and cut away the Dalid, which is really supposed to be the less Lemegar Meklum, which is a unified vessel for the allness of the infinite, where the Shechina is illuminated with the Indian of Kutcha B'richu. But instead it becomes the Dalid Malchuyos to Sitra Achra. In order to carve that out and to be able to reconstruct the Malchus to the Kedusha out of Malchus to Sitra Achra, Hu al Yedei Tochacha. It's going to be through the aspect of Tochacha. It's an amazing thing. Tochacha is the energy of Gevurah, but the Rebbe says no. It's the Chesed Daika comes from Tochacha. Kehal Yedidim Psichas Peshal HaMechiach Nisgala Chachma. Because we might not like to hear it, but when there's a Psichas Peh of a Mechiach, and the Mechiach could be a Tzaddik, the Mechiach could be a spouse, the Mechiach could be a child, the Moshiach could be a friend. The Moshiach could be Moshiach. Just means anybody who's telling you or me a truth that we'd rather not, that there's a part of us that would rather not hear. But assuming that there is a relationship that runs deeper than the words that are being spoken, and on the contrary, the words that are being spoken are not for the purpose of repudiating, but for the purpose of fortifying the relationship, then at the end of the day, unpleasant as it might be to the body and to the baser element to hear Musar, but Nizgala Chachma. At the end of the day, there's a truth that comes out from that. There's a level of awareness that's oriented upward as opposed to downward. There's an element of enlightenment. And the whole reason for the Chachma being revealed by the one who's giving Musar is so that Chesed, which again you can translate as kindness, we can translate as love. Olam Chesed Yibane. Nizgala Chesed, the Ahava, is revealed as a result of the Musar. Ki Ikar Skala Chesed, because the primary revelation of love is Ayidei Chachma. Because the sphere of Chachma, Reishis Chachma, is the beginning of the Tzad Yamin, and that's Chachma, Chesed, Netzach, right? But it all emerges out of the principle of Chachma, which is the masculine element of giving, of productivity, of creativity. And so from Chachma, Chesed emerges. As it says in the Zohar Kodesh Parshas Lech Lecha Ki Kel, the Shem Kel is Nihiru de Chachmasa, is the flow of Chachma, because Kel is associated with Chesed, like the pasuk says, Chesed Kel Kol Ha Yoim, and Kel, being associated with Chesed, is Nehiru de Chachmasa, because the side of Chachma flows down into the next Svira on that kav, on that line, which is the aspect of Chesed. K'may shekasav, Pia Pascha b'Chachma, when her mouth opens up with Chachma, and again, probably a reference to spouses who are really, really good at this kind of thing. V'Saras Chesed ala Shaina. So Pia Pascha b'Chachma, says the Rebbe, is Musar. Her mouth opens up, right? The Eishes Chayil, the woman of valor. Her job is Ezer Kenegda. She's the aspect of Gevurah. Her job, we spoke Thursday night, was the aspect of the Chayma. Remember we spoke about Tivna Chayma Yerushalayim. Kaladar b'lei Isha dar b'lei Chayma, right? A Chayma means there's guidance. And that's the job of an Eishes Chayil. Pia Pascha b'Chachma, but it's all Chesed. V'taras Chesed ala Shaina. Because at the end of the day, it usually helps the relationship progress and proceed and deepen, hopefully, in the proper setting. Difficult conversations lead to even deeper layers of connection, and even deeper layers of working past miscommunications and clarifying feelings. And so there's chesed there. And in order for there to be chesed, in order for this to be true, there needs to be a foundation of love and ava. Otherwise, it's just an argument that doesn't lead anywhere. But assuming that that's there, then adarabba. The more that there's my Tochacha and my Tochacha Pia Pascha b'Chachma, that will reveal the Saras Chesed ala Shaina v'zeh Yehalmeini Tzaddik Chesed v'Yochicheni. The pasuk says right toward the end of Tehillim, Yehalmeini Tzaddik Chesed. That Tzaddik should attack me, should strike me with love. And should give me musar. It's a phenomenal pasuk. It's not such a well-known pasuk, right? Yehalmeini tzaddik chesed. I want the tzaddik to strike me with love. V'yochicheni. Right? What's that? By giving me musar. That's what a person wants. Meaning, hayos, a person. So there are like two levels. A person who starts getting to pneumius usually just wants someone to tell them that they're okay. Wants someone to give them love. Wants someone to hug them and tell them they're amazing and perfect and beautiful. And that's important and true. A person who gets a little bit deeper in, who sort of got what they needed from that aspect, usually as a result of not having gotten that at home or not having gotten that in yeshiva or something else. So a person who has that already, at a certain point, and I was just having a conversation with somebody about this the other day. So he was commenting about the shiur that I gave Thursday night, which was very boundary oriented. And I was speaking very much about, respecting, setting boundaries, the importance of the energy of Gevurah in our lives. Once a person gets to a little bit of a higher level, they want someone to tell them what to do and what not to do. Like, they don't want to be told that they're just okay no matter what. Like, in the same way that children don't always want to be criticized all the time and not given any love, they also don't want to be loved all the time and not given any criticism. It's just that the criticism, or the guidance, not criticism, the guidance and the boundaries need to be on a foundation of love, because Olam Chesed Yibane, because you can't build without love. And so the order has to be in the right order. First comes Ava, and then on the Ava, you can build the Inyan of Yira. But to think that we're going to self-correct from the previous generation, that a lot of us, sort of felt like we were just given a lot of, musar, and not given enough Ava, is to course correct to the other extreme by only giving Ava and not being able to parent and not being able to set boundaries and not being able to say this is okay and this is not okay and there are standards in this family, etc. Zelo, right? This is not correcting. This is perpetuating the mistake, because the mistake, like I've said in the past, was not Gevurah. The mistake was an extreme. That extreme happened to be manifested in an extreme of Gevurah. If you go to the extreme of Chesed, you're not actually correcting anything, because the problem wasn't Gevurah or Chesed, the problem was extreme. Recognize that while most people prefer compliments, accurate criticism is more valuable. So again, I would put the caveat there that it can be more valuable if there's the proper foundation. Right? Otherwise, accurate criticism your whole life will destroy a person's self-worth. So again, it's more nuanced, right? It has to be in the right way and in the right context. But ultimately, it's such a beautiful, these lines are so gewalt, because he puts Heichacha and Tochacha right there in the sugya of Chesed. That lehepech, not only isn't it contrary to Chesed, which would appear to be on the surface because it's Gevurah oriented, it is the ultimate Ava, and this is really what people are looking for. I think our children, we may even be getting to a point, I was really thinking about this more and more, that as a result of the societal revolution toward Pnimius, which has definitely been to larger or varying degrees, but I think in the culture, the TYH, thank you Hashem, back of the wagon, yummy, yummy, swish, swish, whatever, all this stuff, right? And people feel, Amish, thank you Hashem, and Hashem is part of their lives. Hashem needs every Yid's a fire, every Yid's all this, which is, oh my goodness, what a gilui, right? I think we might be coming to a point where we have to start bringing never thought I'd say these words. Within that world of Pnimius, okay, now what though? Like kids want to be told, here is avodas that you can do, and it takes discipline, and it takes commitment, and it takes work. But that's where the happiness is. Otherwise, we're going to spend our whole life being malin and tzaitzes in front of meat boards, and knocking down shot after shot, and singing the B'ditcha Renigin, and that's not either going to lead us to the happiness we're looking for. Where is the happiness we're looking for? Genuine fulfillment, which is a mix between both. And we should be very cautious about going to the other extreme as a result of having been burnt by extreme number one. I think that's really, really important to say.
So for every bowl of Chassidus, you need a spoon full of Musa.
Yes, yes.
It comes together.
That's right. Explain a little bit more for the Chevra what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, but... Because Rav Nosson said,
it's in I read from Moshiach's Nefesh that I assumed it was the concept of Baki B'Shoy, Baki Barat, that you have to have you can't just have. It's very nice that you're saying I'm asking where are you Hashem, but if you're not asking Aye.
In other words, what Adam was making reference to, which is what I was trying to get out of him, is that Rav Nosson says that for every spoonful of musar, you need a whole pot of his chazkas, right? That's yes. So then Adam was riffing on that by saying that it's also the other way. For every bowl of his chazkas, you also need a spoon of musar. Otherwise, right? That's absolutely right. Okay, good.
No, it's
okay. We're all functioning. I can imagine if I would give this year later in the day. Okay, anyway, our brain is on 20% at least, at most. And we need to be able to receive the musar. Even though sometimes it makes us feel not so good. Because again, it came from love. Anybody who ever had a real mentor, a real guide, they know that it's not Ava all the time. You get some patch. I mean, Chacham Ovadia, right? Rav Ovadia Yosef. He was legendary for his patches. He wasn't this teddy bear figure. He wasn't. Rabbi Nachman wasn't either. The Rebbe was. He wasn't the way that we, hagiographically imagine this. But that doesn't take away from why everyone adored him and loved him. It's because it all came from such genuine ava and a yearning to see the people develop and become tzaddikim, and everyone knew that. That's what made him so precious. But it comes derech bizayin. Shemavazan esanu afal pikein tzrichim ana lekabel techachtam kedei lekabel ayadei as a chesed k'nizkel el. Actually, even though this is incredibly difficult because all of us have egos, and all of us have things to protect, and all of us are fragile, and we have to work through those things. But at the end of the day, if we're in a high enough state of consciousness, we're able to utilize the Tochacha, Daika, to be able to access Chesed. Now, I want to abstract this a minute, because again, this is not happening in Torah Chav Beis or Torah Chav Gimel, it's happening in Torah Lamed for a reason. Because if you think about it carefully, we've been talking the whole time of Sechel Tachton and Sechel Elyon. Essentially, this is a microcosmic manifestation in an interpersonal setting of Sechel Tachton and Sechel Elyon. Sechel Tachton is Tochacha, right? Meaning what appears on the surface is the Gevurah-oriented limitations of Tochacha, right? This goes back to Masomat and Be'emunah, right? Where a person needs to be Mesameach Bechelkai. So we said Chelkai is the aspect of Shechina, right? Sameach Bechelkai, Yeshli Kol, is to be able to perceive through the limitations of one's Mitzuntzam Parnasa, to be able to already taste everything and to have everything that one needs, right? That's how we learned it over there. So Sechel, and that was Torah Chav Tes. Sechel Elyon, Sechel Tachton is this Nekuda. Then on the surface, the world appears one way, Sechel Tachton, but if a person has gotten to the consciousness where they're able to overcome by looking beyond what would appear to be on the surface something that can be interpreted as a very lowly, limited, Gevurah-oriented, shutting out God, Alphin, Nefulin, going back to Torah Ches, etc. world. Instead, they're able to mamish perceive, no, there's a Sechel Elyon here. So in the relationship with the Moshiach, the Tochacha is Sechel Tachton. But the Sechel Elyon is the Chesed, the Ava, that's beyond the Sechel Tachton. And so the Rebbe is saying, in order for a person to live with the consciousness of being able to go ahead and to look past the appearance of this lowly world of Malchus to Sitra Achra, Dalid Malchuyos, the Dalid Galuyos, sciences like we learned, secular reductionist philosophy, pushing God out, in order for a person to be able to look past that and to see what's actually going on, first and foremost, in a person's own interpersonal relationships, in a person's own life, they need to get to the consciousness, they need to get to the level where they're able in their own life, Gewalt. Now we can get a little bit more. You're warming me up, Andy. So in a person's interpersonal relationships, a person trains themselves to be able not only to look at the stimulus for a reaction, this goes back to one of the earlier tires, but rather to evoke a deeper, more conscious response to what is being said, instead of just what is being said. Because what is being said, Dibor, is Tzimtzum, is Malchus is Achra, right? And that would appear to be what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to us when he sends us into exile among the Daled Malchuyos, if you want to get super literal with it, right? And so if a person's only taking the Tochacha, then you have Daled Malchuyos. Then okay, Hashem abandoned us. Here we are in exile, traveling from one gullus to another gullus, and this is the Dibur of Hashem, where Hashem is saying terrible things to us, in the form of the Daled Malchuyos to Sitra Achra. But a person who gets to the level of being able to perceive the Sechel Elyon, which is Chesed, 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 which is the Tachlis of all the Sechel Tachton, then we look at gullus and we realize Kil Hashem Hamlucha Moishel Bagoyim. We're not in exile by the Greeks. We're not in exile by the Romans. We're being carried along by HaKadosh Baruch Hu into Greek culture and into Roman culture and so on. Because all there is the unity of the Malchus to Kedusha that's communicating Ava, that's communicating love and respect, that's communicating Emunah in us. Kel Emunah ve'ein Avel, throughout all of these experiences. So this microcosmic experience of being able to look past what appears to be on the surface pure Gevurah Tochacha, to be able to perceive the Sechel Elyon, if that's the case, and it's an appropriate setting, a person's able to perceive the Chesed that's beyond it, then a person trains themselves to become the kind of person who's going to be able to be Kaitzer, the Malchus to Sitra Achra, out of the Dalid, and to reveal the Doles Lemegamiklum from behind it. To take what appears on the surface, Sechel Tachton, and to use that as a vehicle, a conduit for the Sechel Elyon. Ki masha techachtam heleches b'derech lefa'amim b'derech bizoy. Sometimes the Tochacha is taka b'derech bizayin, and it's challenging for a person's ego. Says Rabbi Nachman, first of all, tzarich ladan esam kavschos. When it comes to Tzaddikim, you have to cut them some slack a little bit. You have to understand why they would be a bit more frustrated with us than it appears that we deserve for them to be frustrated with us. Why? Because we have a klal. If a person's in pain, you can't judge a person who's in pain. A person's in pain. Sometimes they react out of pain. Again, a person reacts out of anger, so then deal with your anger. But a person who's in tsar, all the gedarim fall away. It's true. Maybe it's not so tznius for a woman to scream and to cry out in the presence of men, let's say. But if somebody's husband passes away and she's crying out, af echad not going to stop her and tell her kol isha. Right? Ein adam nispis al tzara. That's just an example. A person's in pain. There's no gedarim. Says the Rebbe, guess what? And he was speaking about himself. Ki soivum tzar gadol meitanu. He says that tzaddikim like me, he says, they suffer from the people. They suffer. Ki afilu mashu hu toiv etzleinu, hu ra eitzal tzaddikim. Even the madrigas that we're pretty proud of ourselves, that we got to, whatever it is, fill in the blank, klape what they want to see from us, klape karavelt, like Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say, klape what the tzaddikim believe we could do on this planet, babkas. But again, not because they're belittling toward us, but because they know what we could be. They know what this world could be. They feel that Sarah Shechina. And so it's not about them and what they want, and they want that their Hasidim should be big tzaddik. They want to conquer the world for Hashem. So they feel tsar. Okay, Rabbi Chazal say, Kol Tevasin Shal Rishayim Ra Ye'etz La Tzaddikim. So Al Pi Pshat, it means, right, that when the Rishayim prosper, so then it causes pain to the tzaddikim. But the way that he reads it is, no, called Taivasan Shorishayim, what is considered taiv to the Rishayim, meaning Baruchnius, Ra Ye'etz La Tzaddikim. That's still not the level. He says, obviously our wasting our time is Ra Etzlam, because they could see what we could accomplish with our time, and how Hashem needs every Yid, and how every single Yid is capable of so much, and about how our time is so limited on this planet, and we were sent here not to get extricated, and is that the right word? Extricated means taken out of. What's the word I'm looking for? Stuck in, entrenched in, is another X word. Right, it's early in the morning. Come back to me later. Right, not to get entrenched in this worldliness and in the distraction, but to really, so that for sure is Ra Etzlam. But even the good things we do, even specifically tefillah she be'erkeinu rak toiv, that would appear to be really good, Ra Eitzla Tzaddikim. It's not on the level. And the Tzaddikim really, they're like a coach. They expect so much from us. They believed so much in us. I just gave a whole shiur. I mentioned it in a previous Likutei Moharan shiur a few days ago. It was the shiur on Sechel Elyon of last week. I really highly encourage, if you can find some extra time, and you can bear hearing any more of me in a particular day. The Sechel Elyon shiur from last week, it was all about how Rabbi Nachman's opinion was that it's a huge mistake for people to think that tzaddikim got to the madrega that they got because they were born with hayich neshamas. He believed that every yid could mamish do it. The only reason they did it is because they put in more effort. And if you put in effort, you can do it. And he drilled this into his Chasidim. He got very makbid when somebody made a suggestion like, okay, yeah, I see your nechad Baal Shem Tov. No, he said, everything that I have, I earned. I worked for. And the reason he wanted to tell us that is because he believed that every single yid could reach that madrega. So even tefillah shebi yerkeinu rak toiv, he ra eitz la tzaddikim bebechinas utfilasi b'ra'isayim. Right? So it doesn't mean utfilasi b'ra'isayim. Al pi pshat means that David HaMelech was davening b'ra'isayim for the downfall of his enemies. But over here the Rebbe is interpreting it utfilasi, that every Jew should say, my tefillah is ra to the tzaddikim. Now here Rabbi Nachman adds a more particularized layer of understanding. Not simply the way that I was explaining it before, that they hold us to such high standard and in such esteem, and they believe in us so deeply that they get frustrated when we're not doing what we're supposed to do or what we could do. Here the Rebbe adds on a deeper layer. He says our tefillah is mival belas oisam. How so? How does our tefillah confound and confuse them? Ki kol ha'irbuv hadas, because all of the confused nature of our thoughts, v'chol ha'babulim, and all of the mishigasim, kol ha'shtusim, and all the folly sheyesh lanu lefamim, that all of us sometimes entertain in our minds, hakol nimshach b'tfilaseinu. Everything shows up when you're davening. Things that you'd never think of the rest of the day. You start to daven, boom, your brain is off. What was it? One of the tzaddikim, I think it was Rav Shalom Shadran. He said, some people travel with horses and some people travel with wagons. He said, Jews travel b'shem Hashem Elokeinu naskir. The second we start davening, boom, we're off. That's how we travel. Right? So all the bilbul adas, hakol nimshach b'tfilaseinu. Kikol abulbulim, all the confusions and the shtiyot and all the different things that we're thinking about, bein b'kodesh, bein b'chol, All the various thoughts that a person might have, it all comes into our minds specifically during prayer. There's like a huge tribunal ready to listen to all of the different shtiot of all of our different parts, right? Let's say we're talking like, internal family systems, all the different feelings and emotions, and it all comes into our mind at a time of tefillah. When a person stands up to speak, here the Rebbe has another witticism based on another pasuk. Pasuk says, "Mi mal Gevurah Hashem yashmiya kol tihilasai." Who will make known, who will utter and articulate and declare the Gevurah of Hashem, yashmiya kol tihilasai, in order to go ahead and to make heard all of His tehillah. So says the Rebbe, the word tihilasai could mean praise, but it could also mean bewilderment. L'shain uva malachav yasim tahala, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like behala, right? Tahala. HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed bewilderment among the angels. Hainu irbuv ubulbulim. It's a reference to all of the distractions and all of the foolish thoughts. Sha'az mashmiyan as atzman daika b'shasha emel espalo l'malal Gevurah Hashem. That mi yimal Gevurah Hashem, when a person starts to daven, that's yimal Gevurah Hashem, yashmiya kol tihilasai. Tihilasai is tahalasai. In that moment, yashmiya kol tihilasai, all the shtusim and all the distracting thoughts come to a person then. And there are two reasons why this might happen. And there are two aspects to this. Number one, it could be that when those forces see that we're davening b'kavana karai, so all those thoughts come into our mind to be mitukan, like we learned in a previous Torah Chav Vav about the aliyas ha-machshavas. Remember about how the Tzaddik Daika at the time, right, where he has the most kavana, that's the time to be mala all of the lower thoughts and the base elements and to lift them up. And we gave Lamashal, a person has a thought of his nus, chas v'shalom, in some ezeshu way, right? So a person tracks it back to the midah of Chesed. Midah of Chesed. Why do I have the midah of Chesed in me? Because I'm really supposed to love God. And actually what I'm looking for in these lower, baser, more physical, corporeal, inappropriate attractions is really just connection and love and oneness. And I'm not gonna find that there. I'm gonna find that in my relationship with Hashem. Boom, you elevated the machshava. Right, and in that way, this was the way of the Baal Shem Tov, not to grapple with the Yetzer Hara. In Musar, the Yetzer Hara is real, and you grapple with him. Right, there are real base tendencies, and we have to figure out how to maneuver. In Chassidus, the Yetzer Hara is an illusion. It's all Elokus, and in that sense, there's no one to grapple with. You look right through it. You think the Yetzer Hara for his service of delivering you a midah, like the Moharan says in Parshas V'eschan, and it's a big privilege that we have a Yetzer Hara because he awakens up our natural midas, and then we can dismiss him and then use those midas for kedusha. That's how it's supposed to go. And in Chassidus, it becomes much easier because we operate out of a place of das. You're not meeting the Yetzer Hara face to face. You root yourself in your higher self, in your chelik alakamimal, in a place hopefully of consciousness, and then you're too wise to get entrenched in that ma'avak. You're not on that level. So you're looking down on it from a more detached place to be able to make proper decisions, not being fooled and schlepped down into that inyan. That's the inyan of Yosef HaTzadik vayima'en, right? And the Svarim say he didn't get into a masu matan with the Yetzer Hara. It's just vayima'en. This is not what I'm doing. I had a very similar agasha I mentioned to the Rav of Anshe Shlomo. I was speaking there at the Kiddush this past Shabbos. I never saw any of the Svarim speak about this, but it's such a powerful nakuda. Where in last week's parsha, it's arguable that all of Jewish history is talui on 3 letters in last week's parsha, much in the same way that the Svarim do say that all of Jewish history hinges, in my bar mitzvah parsha actually coming up, Parshas Vayeshev, where Vayishaleu ish leimar matavakesh, right? The person asks Yosef, "What are you looking for?" Okay, yeah, and he points him in the way of Daisan, right? If that interaction, then the Svarim do say, if that interaction doesn't happen, where one Jew, Malach, asks another Jew, "My brother, what are you looking for?" and points him. He doesn't even get him what he wants. He just points him in the right direction. Yosef doesn't get sold down to Mitzrayim. The brothers don't go to get grain. They don't know how they're moving there. Galus Mitzrayim. We don't get out. We don't go to Har Sinai. So the Sfarim say it all hinges. I believe I heard this from Moshe Matatyahu, Rabbi Zevlev. I believe that I heard this Torah from Zevlev ages ago, and it made such an impact on me. Right, that all of Jewish history can be traced back to that anonymous person just pointing a Jew in the right direction. So the Sfarim do say that. But I had a Hargasha in Maver Sedra last week, which is even earlier, obviously, 3 letters. Bakare. What are the 3 letters? It's a word. What word? 3 letters, tiny little word. You blink, you miss it. All of Jewish history depends on these 3 letters. Rivka has asked, "Will you go with Eliezer?" And how does she respond? Elech. Yes, I will go. That's it. She becomes the mother of Yaakov and Esav. And what struck me is there's no conversation around it. There's no, like, this is a really intense moment. They're about to give their little girl over to some strange man who claims he's, like, things were much looser back then, who claims he's the cousin, whatever, coming from the same mishpacha. And she just very resolutely, Elech, I shall go. This is how it is with the Satan. There's no maso matan. There's just clarity. I know what you are. I'm not falling for the shtick. I'm not getting sucked into the drama of this battle. It's not a battle. I'm a king, you're an ant. I'm an elephant, you're a mouse. Right? Going back to Rabbi Nachman's thing of the shtus that we think that so I'm not going to get dragged down to the Yerla. I'm a prince. So this is not relevant for me. So what's the value of the Yetzer Hara? Thank you for delivering me one of the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and awakening it in my body so that then I could, thank you very much, I'll take it from here. Thank you, you're dismissed. Now I'll take that energy that was awoken within me. I'll be able, through a higher level of consciousness, to be able to identify what midah is this coming from. How is that midah supposed to be used for my relationship with Hashem? And then to channel it upward. So says the Rebbe, that was very long. What's the word? Going off topic. There's a word for it. Anyway, here we are. Okay, so now we're back, right? So that's the inyan of the first reason why machshavei zaros might approach a person during their davening. Again, back inside. Person sees, that, right, the Yetzer Hara or the Satan, the lower forces see a person's davening well, good. Throw him what's called an alley-oop, right, in basketball, right? Give him an assist, pass it to him. He's right by the goal. That's what it is. It's mamash an assist from the lower forces. Shovel over or pass him the football or soccer ball, or pass him the puck in hockey, right? Whatever it is, but get it to him because that's all it is. Shovel the lower machshavos, which carry the midas inside of them, into this person's mind, so that he could dunk them or score the goal, right? And he can put them where they're supposed to go. Now's the time where they're finally able to be rectified. Because there's a holy spark inside of them. And that holy spark that I just mentioned before is the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's within that machshava. And how that midah get there in the first place? The way the midah got there in the first place is because prior we had that midah awoken within us. We misinterpreted and thought that it was a taiva ra, and we acted out on that. But the nitzas de kedusha that's in that maisa avera is the chesed and the midah that we really were given that midah and that impulse to use for a higher thing. Then we mischanneled it and we used it inappropriately. But the maisa avera is not bad. It's of our ka. It just means that we missed an opportunity to connect to Hashem. But within that avera is a nitzitz kadosh. So now that avera comes back into our mind. What's propelling that avera? The same thing that propelled it out of you in the first place, which was the holy midah of Chesed. You understand, the Avera is a body. It's not a neshama. The neshama of the Aveira is a holy Chesed, Tamid, is a Nitzitz Kadosh. That's what caused the Aveira in the first place. Otherwise, an Aveira is not doing itself. A person does the Aveira. Why does a person do the Aveira? Because of a holy impulse that gets misinterpreted and it gets acted out in a way that's completely misaligned with the emes of what it was supposed to be. That propels the Aveira into existence. Says the Rebbe, anytime that a person has a machshava Aveira, remembers something they did in the past, has a similar taiva to something they did in the past, what is propelling that machshava? Says the Rebbe, that same nitzitz to kedusha that caused the Aveira in the first place. It's trying to get elevated. It's trying to get fixed. Unbelievable thing. Ki yesh behem nitzotzes kedoshim shetzrichim tikkun. They need a tikkun. So that's one reason why we might be having machshavei zaros. Or there's another level. Machma she'einu roi lihispalel. The other reason is because she'einu roi lihispalel, when a person really isn't on the level to daven. And the forces of Gevurah, this is a very different thing, are actually trying to confuse the person and putting obstacles in his way to daven, right? Which is a little bit theologically confusing, because how could the midas hadin be putting obstacles in a person's place? We're going to learn more about that in Torah Kuf Tesvav, not our sugya for now, but keep that in mind, because we're going to get back to it later in Likutei Moharan. Al Kopanim. But the Rebbe says, bottom line, bein kach u bein kach, whatever the reason is, it is b'shas hatfila daika. It is specifically at a time of tefillah that bayim kol ha'arbuvim v'chol ha'bulbulim shala adam v'nishmoim etzlei az. Everything comes to attack a person, daika, when they're standing to daven. U'b'shvil zeh nekrayim ha'bulbulim v'ha'arbuvim Tahala kanal. That's why we refer to them as tahala, which is bewilderment. So it isn't just stam a remes, right? Tehila, which is a time of davening, can turn into tahala, right? Because it's a bewildering moment. A person's consciousness is lifted out of the mundanity of the regular space where they're focused on something specific. Now they're standing at Shemona Esrei, their eyes are closed, they're detached from this world, the level of outside stimulus is very low, and internally, lots of things start happening. Tehila tahala. So me, Yimalo Gevurah Hashem, the minute that a person starts to daven, Yashmiya kol tahalasai, tehilasai tahalasai. So says the Rebbe, think of it. That's the tefillah that we experience. But v'chol ha-tefillas ha'elu kol ha'arbuvim ba'im el ha-tzaddikim. When we said in Torah Beis that all of our tefillos go to the Tzaddik, like all of the panels of the Mishkan were brought to Moshe Rabbeinu in order for Moshe Rabbeinu to put the Mishkan together, that means that all of our tefillos come to the Tzaddik Hadar and they're building up Kaim of the Shechina. Says Rabbi Nachman, every tefillah comes with the whole package. So the Tzaddikim are in some way affected by all of our shtus that come into our heads during tefillah. And it all goes to the tzaddik. And the tzaddik has to sort of strain out. Again, I don't know what this actually means, right? I don't know if this is a conscious process, subconscious process, and a cognitive process, a spiritual process. I have no idea. Got to ask a tzaddik. I have no idea. But in some sense, the tzaddik has to, it seems, the tzaddik has to strain the tefillah to get rid of all of the stuff that just ended up in here. It's like salami, you know, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of garbage and like a little bit of meat somewhere. He has to sort of strain it out in order to get what he needs to get. And that's bothersome. And like, I feel like only a tzaddik who experienced this would even think to write such a thing. Like, nobody would even make this stuff up. Like, no one would even think this unless this is A, true, and B, having been experienced by this particular individual. Otherwise, who thinks like this? And he says this pretty clearly, that Tzaddikim are Moshiach. That's the aspect of Moshiach, because they're the messianic energy. Because all the tefillos come to Moshiach to be elevated, which literally means, as a result of the praise of me, says Hashem, I'm going to withhold Gevurah from you. But echtam is a bechin of what? Torah Beis, what is the word echtam connected to? Moshiach, yes, but Echtam is another way of saying Chaitam. Shekalatilas boim lebechinas Moshiach utihilasi. All of our tefillos Echtam lach. They go to the bechina of Echtam. What's Echtam? Moshiach. Shu bechinas Chaitam. Like we learned in Torah days at length, because Chaitam is an aspect of the nose, but bechinas Ruach Apenu Moshiach Hashem. Moshiach is the energy of the nose. Besamim, spirituality. The chush that's connected to the neshama, shaneshama nenamem. Ki Moshiach umarach v'day. And the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Moshiach will just smell out what the MS is, and he won't need a sort of cognitive process. It will be very intuitive. Moshiach will just know what the truth is. B'bechinas v'haricha b'yeres Hashem, like the pasuk in Yeshayahu says, v'haricha b'yeres Hashem, that Moshiach will smell us out with his yeres Hashem. Haina b'tfilas. That's an aspect of prayer. She'mechinas yiras Hashem he tishalal. Tefillah, tehillah is a connection, is related to yiras Hashem, and that's v'harichai, and that's chaitam, and that's a silasi echtam, and that's Moshiach. But that's also the energy of Moshiach that's within every tzaddik v'tzaddik. I just read somewhere recently, not to get into unpleasant things, unfortunately, but I'll just mention quickly that somebody once came to Rav Shach and asked him, really, I mean, you can't make shalom with the Lubavitch Rebbe. You can't. You have to be so militant against him. I'm not getting into that whole thing. And Rav Shach answered, if the Lubavitch Rebbe will say b'pem maleh that he's not Moshiach, then I'll make peace. So the story goes that they came to Lubavitch Rebbe and communicated this to what Rav Shach said. And the Lubavitch Rebbe said, b'shem panavayif, and I can't say that I'm not Moshiach because it's before Shemar Naim that every year has a nitzutz of Moshiach in it. Kacha. That was the end of the situation. Of course he's Moshiach, because I'm Moshiach, because you're Moshiach, because every single yid is a nitzutz of Moshiach. But the Tzaddikim, their nitzutz of Moshiach is much stronger. So the Rebbe says, and it's mefurish, there should be a very favorite Torah amongst Lubavitchers, no? Ki Tzaddikim hein bechinas Moshiach. He literally says that. But yes, the Lubavitch Rebbe is Moshiach, because the Tzaddikim are Moshiach. We just have to upgrade our concept of what Moshiach is and graduate from like a pauper riding in on a donkey. We have to grow up, all right? Moshiach is a consciousness. Moshiach is an energy. Moshiach is an awareness. And Moshiach is an emancipated mind. The Lubavitch Rebbe was an example of a person who carried Moshiach consciousness. So the Rebbe says any true tzaddik is a bechina of Moshiach. And he attributes to that bechina Moshiach all these psukim that relate to Moshiach's connection with the nose, the chaitam, and tefillah and yiras shamayim. Ki u'moirach, it says the Rebbe, ki u'moirach u'margish ba'tefillah shemekabel mehem as kol echad ve'echad kafi mashu. That's what it means. V'haricha b'yiras Hashem. Yiras Hashem, said the Gemara in Sanhedrin, means he will judge. V'haricha b'yiras Hashem, moirach v'dain. He will smell and he will be able to determine what kind of person a person is. Says the Rebbe, okay, but how will he, what's the input that will enable Moshiach to do that? Well, what did it say? V'haricha, which is moirach v'dain, b'yiras Hashem. What's yiras Hashem? Yiras Hashem, he tishalal, tefillah. So by discerning the tefillos that are flowing toward the neshama of the tzaddik, he'll be able to tell what kind of person we are because he gets our tefillos. So that means that Rabbi Nachman told his Hasidim, the second you walk into my presence, I know everything about you. Because Rabbi Nachman's been reading all of our emails. You understand? Our wires are tapped. The tzaddik knows. He knows our stuff. And yet, and this is the key point, we were just having a conversation. I wish I had more time, because it's a really important Indian. I'm on a very large group with many prestigious therapists and psychiatrists, mental health professionals, and rabbis. And it's a phenomenal group. It's called Torah and Psych. And if you're interested, so for mental health professionals or people in Likutei Moharan rabbis, it is a whole conversation about the interfacing between an interaction between the world of Torah and the world of psychology. And many amazing conversations. A phenomenal group. Amazing people. And one of the conversations recently was, can AI replace a therapist? Because many people are using AI for therapy now, right? Because it's free. and because you can just ask it to play therapist, and l'cha'ira therapy takes place in a narrative form, which is verbiage, and it's loaded with all the latest theories, and you can ask it to choose any modality, and it can literally guide you through it. And people are using, and it was a fascinating discussion about what some of the pros might be from the standpoint of, you can really trust that it's unconditionally present. Like nothing you tell it will make it disengage, right? And so you can be totally honest in a way that you might not even be with your therapist. Then it got into a whole conversation about payment and the ethics of the therapist taking money, but the client knowing that the minute that they stop paying, the therapist stops seeing them, which is like, does that mean the therapist stops caring? Of course, it doesn't mean that, but and a very, very deep and apparently painful conversation about the complexities around this, because and fascinating stuff. But one of the points that was made was that AI might be able in a certain sense to be even more effective in a certain bechina, even though it was clarified later that there are other ways in which not, because the whole therapeutic relationship is built on rupture and repair, right, which is not really possible with an AI. It was a fascinating conversation. But the point is that the AI will be there for you no matter what. No matter what. No, despite knowing all of your junk. I think one of the most vulnerable, I'm going to end with this, I think one of the most vulnerable things for a person to hack, which is just really important to know, is if you use ChatGPT the same way I do, is your ChatGPT account. Because ChatGPT knows you. Because that's where you go for all your stuff, all the stuff you're embarrassed to ask any other human, you're going to go there for. If someone gets access to your email address, they have access to your ChatGPT account, which means they have access to your whole ChatGPT history. Just be conscious of that. The Tzaddik hears all of it. When you walk into the presence of the Tzaddik, who we described in Torah Daled, where you're literally confessing, the Tzaddik is the most compassionate presence, who knows all of your junk, not because you told it to him, but because your tefillos told it to him. He knows all of the stuff. And yet, he sees your greatness. And he knows that that's not you. He knows that that's shtuyot. And his job is to help you rise to that higher place, to look down upon the struggle instead of being stuck in it, and to be able to introduce you to the treasure that you have within. Like Lubavitch Rebbe said, the psychoanalysts, dug and found rocks and whatever and dirt, and a Rebbe digs and he finds gold and diamonds. I think it clarifies just how incredible this relationship is by knowing that this is what the Tzaddik perceives. Let's just read it 2 lines later. So the Tzaddikim suffer because of our tefillah. So if a tzaddik ever seems a little frustrated, you can come. Essentially, says the Rebbe, cut me some slack. Okay, I'm dealing with a lot of baggage.
Okay, I read something about a person whose child took their own life, and they hacked his devices to see they thought maybe it'd be groomers at the other. And they saw how ChatGPT talked this kid into suicide.
That's right. There are cases like that.
If you read the screenshot, it was actually unbelievable.
There are cases like that. We should say
but crazy.
ChatGPT. We should say
now would be a good time. Get the road. It was so scary. Seeing the dialogue all the way from ChatGPT, how it took us horrifying. Literally.
We should say these cases are extremely rare, and there's another thing called artificial intelligence psychosis, which is hallucinating. Very rare.
Statistics. It doesn't matter how small they are. If you're caught up in it, it's your whole world.
Oh no, absolutely. No, this is a real thing. Okay, Sechel Elyon. Great day, everybody. Thanks.
שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי, מלך חי וקיים, על כל נשימה שאני